Today on A Word on Westerns, Russ Tamblyn and Ruta Lee.
And how he conceived that barn-raising dance is incredible. And boy, did we work on that.
Well, you were a dancer beforehand. Now, Russ was a tumbler.
A tumbler, an acrobat, and everything.
Welcome to A Word on Westerns, where we talk to the greatest Western creators of yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
When you're a jet all the way, and I'll stop this right now so we don't get a claim.
Okay, thanks for stopping, because you just never know what will be claimed on YouTube. They just grab it and they say, nope, you can't use this song, so...
It's talk singing, and Russ says himself he's more of a dancer than a singer.
Well, he sure could dance and tumble.
Yes.
And we're going to learn all about that in this interview with Russ Tamblyn, about West Side Story, about the fastest gun alive, about the remake of Cimarron, working with Glenn Ford, who's a favorite of mine, and also...
We're going to hear about him in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
With Ruta Lee, and they get together for an interview for the first time since they've done the movie, which was over 50 years ago. And their energy is like, I've always thought of Ruta as the Energizer Bunny.
She really is.
And
she's so great with a live audience, too.
She is, and she's great just as a one-on-one. And we were lucky to have both Russ and Ruta together to talk about the golden age of Hollywood in the 50s.
Yeah. Russ worked with a lot of legendary directors throughout his career, from Robert Wise and Anthony Mann all the way through David Lynch, who we recently lost.
Yes. What a versatile guy, and he had been a child actor, too, working in The Boy with Green Hair with his friend Dean Stockwell, and then actually hanging out and making music and making films with Dennis Hopper and Neil Young. We're going to hear all about that.
All right, well, let's stop holding him up.
All right, let's get to Ruta and Russ. Let's do Russ first, and then we're going to bring in Ruta, and we'll talk to both of them together. How's that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, here we go. Thanks for joining us today. I am Rob Word, the host of A Word on Westerns, with my son,
RJ, and I'm here.
And I'm glad you're here, too. His career is so fascinating for me. He worked with some of the giants. The big MGM movie that had been an Oscar winner in 1931, Cimarron, the first Western ever to win Best Picture.
Richard Dix.
And he's a little stiff in it, Richard Dix is, but the movie itself has great moments in it. The one you're in, directed by Anthony Mann, the first 2/3 of it is fantastic. Somehow it lost its way in the end, but you were a bad kid, a gunfighting kid.
The Cimarron Kid.
Yeah. He was great, though. He was fast on the draw in real life, too, wasn't he?
Yeah. He actually turned me on to a guy that makes fast gun holsters. The whole part of it is just stiff holster. So it's really easy to pull a gun out. And I learned how to do it. And I used to do it with Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh, he was fast.
He was very fast.
Yeah.
He was so fast that he could actually do a thing where you could challenge him. And, and we'd have guns with blanks, and he could actually pull his gun out and shoot it before you could even do anything.
I'm glad that you were into that, too, and got fast, because Glenn, you were also in a movie with him called The Fastest Gun Alive, which pretty much is him.
Right.
You had a musical number in that film.
Yeah, and Glenn tried to get it cut out of the movie. He went to the head of the studio. They told me, the head told me that Glenn tried to get the number cut out of the movie. In fact, it was cut out, the first sneak preview they had in the theater. And you know what, during those previews, you fill out a thing at the end, out in the lobby. But what happened is that when they cut the number out and they showed it, they didn't cut out the credit at the end where it said Russ Tamblyn's dance number choreographed by Alex Romero. So that was pretty funny. And almost like 90% of all the cards said, where was Russ Tamblyn's dance number? So they put it back in.
Blame it on Glenn again.
And I worked with him again after that. And I said, you tried to get my number cut out of the movie. He says, Russ, it was nothing personal. It was just that this was a simple little black and white Western. And then suddenly he said, you come on and start dancing like Gene Kelly,
on the shovels.
And dance on shovels. And he said, I thought it was a great number, but it was too much. He says, I love dancers. I was married to
Eleanor Powell.
Yeah. So that was kind of wild. And he was a good friend of mine.
Yeah, he was a good man. And I loved watching his movies. In The Fastest Gun Alive, I just thought it was weird that here's Glenn. He's a rugged hero type guy. And the guy who wants to outdraw him is Broderick Crawford.
Yeah.
Somebody wake up Rod. Come on, he's got a scene here.
Yeah, no, that's very true. When you look at him and you thought, how the hell did he be a fast gun drawer?
So the whole point of the movie is kind of lost on me, and the highlight was the shovel dance.
Yeah.
How did you do the bit with the shovels? Did you come up with that by yourself?
Well, I came up with Alex Romero.
Mm-hmm.
I always liked working with him as a choreographer because we would work together. He never said doing this and that, and we sort of worked out numbers together. I did the dance number. If you watched it again, you could run it and see it, and you'll see that there was a cut. When I jump up on the shovels, I had to make me a special pair of shovels that had a piece of steel on the blade. And then they bolted my boots onto the shovels. So I would put them on that way with the shovel, hold it. Otherwise, I could never have done it because you walk on it a little bit, but I couldn't. The problem is you had to pull it up with your hand.
Well, nobody notices the trick in the movie.
And then right near the end of the dance number of dancing with the shovels, I go bump, 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 and then there's another cut. And then I got on the loose shovels and I dropped the handle down. But everybody said, God, that was amazing that you could do that.
Kids that trying that at home and stuff.
You can't do it. It's too hard to keep it on the bottom of your foot.
Mm-hmm. Let's get back to the other Glenn Ford film again, Cimarron, because Anthony Mann, who had just come off of a string of really successful James Stewart Westerns that are classics like The Naked Spur and Bend to the River and all these wonderful things. And he got fired from that film. What happened?
I don't know.
That land rush sequence, too, which was amazing, so well choreographed and exciting. And Glenn, not only was he fast with a gun, he's a good horseman, too.
Well, and that he loved that. He told me one time that if he could only make one genre of movies, it would be Westerns.
Mm-hmm.
He loved doing Westerns.
Well, there's something about it, and on that one in particular, because they were out on location. But also, like the traditional studio films, MGM especially, there were so many scenes that were shot on a soundstage, too.
All the ones that I did on location, there were also studio shots.
Well, that's the way the studios were. They had a whole crew of people, of designers and artisans that they needed to keep employed at the time. So they wanted it to be in their control.
I was under contract at MGM, and West Side Story was made United Artists. I tested for the part of Tony, and this MGM let me go and test, and I tested for that part, and I tested with several actresses that were in contention to play Maria. And that was the part that I really wanted to do, was the part of Tony.
You'd had seen it on Broadway, the play.
Yeah, I'd seen it on Broadway, and I was in the Army at that time. And so I bought the album in New York, and I came back to Fort Sill in Oklahoma, and that was it. I memorized Tony's songs in it, and that's what I really wanted to do. And I had the same agent, Phil Gersh, the same agent as Bob Wise. So I knew I had an in calling Phil and ask him, how is it going? How am I doing? He said, well, you're still in contention, but they said it's just between you and another actor. So I said, well, let me know. And then he called me one night and said, I'm sorry, Russ, but they gave the part to an actor named Richard Beamer, but they offered you the part of Riff. And I said, Riff? No, I said, he's like this really, really hardcore dancer, ballet dancer. And he said, so do you want to do it or not? And I said, yes. And so that's what I did. And then also on that note, I came in to meet Jerry Robbins and Bob Wise. I came in, met them, and the first thing that Jerome Robbins said to me was, he says, well, now I got to tell you, he says, I've seen a bunch of your musicals and stuff, and you do a lot of acrobatics all the time, but there'll be no acrobatics in this because Riff is not an acrobat. It has to be straight dancing. So I said, okay, I'll do my best. During the filming of it, Jerry got fired because he was taking too long to get shots, and we were in New York way too long. So he got fired, and one of the dancers in it, Tony Bordente, who was also married to Chita Rivera at one time, and he took over the choreography. He says, well, now that Jerry's gone, let's put some tumbling back in. So that's when I did like a round-off backflip with a full twist.
Yeah, the thing on the high bar that you do, you're just sitting up there doing a scene. Those are the things that people remember.
Yeah, but it was okay because then I found out later, Tony Mordente told me, they said, when I showed Jerry what you had done, what I had you do it and everything, he said, oh, that's great. My wife Bonnie and I went to see a show in Pantages Theater here, which was called Jerome Robbins Broadway. And they did one of the numbers from West Side Story, and the kid who was playing Riff did a flip in it. And I knew Jerry had choreographed it. So afterwards, I couldn't wait to get back stage and ask him how he got away with doing a flip. And he said, oh, that was part of the audition. You had to be able to tumble.
Really?
So
wow.
I pat myself on.
Yeah, you bet. Because it was co-directed, Robert Wise and Jerry. When Jerry got fired, did Wise jump in to help more with the musical numbers? Or
they were pretty well choreographed in a way, but then they changed a lot. And I guess they may have had a deal when Jerry signed on as co-director that Jerry was going to handle all the musical numbers and then Bob Wise was going to handle the drama, which worked out pretty well for a while, except Jerry just went on too long.
Did the pace change once he left? Did it increase, go faster?
Well, the set closed down. We came back from New York, and then my agent, Phil Gersh, said, guess what? He says that they're thinking of closing down, of not finishing the film because they're running out of money. We waited, it was like maybe a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, that everything shut down, and then we started in again without Jerry. But then I was the only one that knew because I was with Phil Gershon. He told me, he says, yeah, they fired him.
Boy, it's a good thing they came up with the rest of that money because the film is a classic. It's great. Best film of the year, too.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
But they were running out of money.
Wow. I'm going to mention my friend Richard Hurd, who's no longer with us. 10 years ago at one of the autograph shows, Richard, who used to be in my painting class group every Saturday, he said, Rob, you got to get Russ on your show. And so he introduced us, and you were very kind, but you said, I can't talk to you, Rob. I'm writing my book. Oh, you'll have to buy my book. Well, I did buy your book, and here it is right here, Dancing on the Edge. And it's a great book, too. And thank you, Richard Hurd, for introducing us. And Russ, thank you for writing this book.
Buy the book. It's great.
Yeah, buy this book. So you worked with Glenn again, though. Cades County. Yeah, another Western, a modern.
More than that. Yeah, Cades County, Fastest Gun Alive, and Don't Go Near the Water.
Because you did several films with him. Were you off camera? Did you hang out with him at all?
Yeah, I did a little bit. We were friends. He used to come to my beach house all the time, and he was a great guy. I really liked him. He was a good friend.
He did some wonderful films too, and there's something about his presence on camera that's you just like him.
Yeah.
You did a film with my son's godfather, Sidney Poitier.
Oh, Sidney, yeah.
And Sidney I used to tease him about the wig he wore in that film, and he laughed. He had such a great laugh, too.
He was a tremendous guy. I can tell you a story about him when we were shooting it in Yugoslavia. The day that he came on the set, they were going to shoot
Moors,
yeah, with all of his Moors. And he looked around, he says, "Where's my black men?" And they said, "Oh, we couldn't find any here in Yugoslavia." We just had a lot of good times together.
Didn't you sleep out under the stars one night?
Yes. How did you know that?
Well, this book. I read this wonderful book.
Oh.
And it's in this book.
Hey, who wrote that?
Oh,
When I said
oh my gosh. And you wrote this book. Right here. This is the one.
Yeah, we did. He had a girlfriend at that time, an actress, Sidney did.
Diane Carroll.
Diane Carroll, that's it. Yeah, I couldn't remember that.
Well, I just was guessing.
But we slept out under the stars, and
how special.
It was terrific. And then when we went back to London together, we went back to do some shots in London. And we both stayed at the same hotel. I remember it was really nice. And we wanted to really celebrate because Yugoslavia was so horrible. The food was terrible, and we were there for months. So we went out to dinner one night. We went to this restaurant called the White Elephant, which was one of the most famous, really expensive restaurants in London. And we went there and we thought, let's really celebrate. So we ordered just everything, just Dom Perignon with champagne and pheasant under glass. And it was just a massive amount of food that we ordered. And we'd eat a little bit and then leave the rest. And at the end of the meal, Sidney said, "Okay, I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for this." And I said, no, look, I have money in every pocket because we both had per diems.
And there was no place to spend it in
Yugoslavia. So that was pretty funny. We were arguing about who was going to pick up the check. And the maitre d' came over to our table and said, "We're so honored to have you two here. We're picking up the whole check." And then we looked at each other and thought, wouldn't you know it, when you got the money and you're ready to spend it, you can't even do that.
Well, I'd like to talk about a legendary director that's not Robert Wise. It's not Anthony Mann. It's not anybody but our friend Al Adamson, the director of Satan's Sadists, the Dracula versus Frankenstein, Blazing Stewardesses. Now, why weren't you in Blazing Stewardesses with Al?
I don't know. I wish I'd have never been in any of his movies, to tell you the truth. Pretty weird that he was, all these movies he made where it's like the blood of something, the blood of something else. And
yes, the blood of the mummy's tomb.
But it had blood in the title. And oddly enough, the guy who worked on his property in Palm Springs, I guess, he had a little house there, killed him and buried him in the cement.
And it took a while to find him.
Yeah.
Like he was missing.
Yeah.
So what a strange career. And his father was called Denver Dixon and made Westerns in the 30s.
Oh, yeah.
And then became like an unknown character actor. But he was the B-Western Ed D. Wood of the directors in the films that he made. I'll send you one of those so the lineage there with Al and his dad. I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy that I've got to read your book because there's so many stories in there. We didn't even get to talk about your pal Neil Young, and I've got all of his albums and CDs, seen him in concert 3 or 4 times. Always a great show.
We lived next door to each other in Topanga. That's when we became friends. We went all over the United States, and also we did a tour in Japan and Australia, and so I've been friends with his for a long time. And I did a video with him where I played his feet.
What were you smoking at that time?
Well, you better believe we were smoking a lot of pot. Those were the days. but they would do a shot of him doing this, like from the waist up, and then they would cut, and it would be his legs doing dance steps, and that was me.
And your friend Dean Stockwell was involved with that film and a lot of your adventures together too, and you met him in your very first film, The Boy with the Green Hair.
Yeah, we became friends at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a story about him that was pretty wild. We were living together in Laurel Canyon, and one day we were going to the market. So we drove down, and Dean was driving, and we pulled up to a stoplight, and we stopped, and I was in the passenger seat up front sitting next to him. And I looked over to my right, and there was a teenager whose hair was green. He had dyed his hair green. And I nudged Dean, and I said, Dean, look, do you believe that? And so we were both staring over there, and the guy caught us staring, the kid, and he rolled the window down, and he said, what's the matter? You've never seen anybody with green hair before? I wanted to say, not only did we see green hair, but this was the boy with green hair. He's the first one that ever had green hair, but it would have been just a long conversation.
Well, let me talk about one more Western that you did, and this is an interesting concept because you played a man with fantasies about learning to fly in Life and Times of Grizzly Adams, a Dan Haggerty and Denver Pyle show, and the twist at the end is that you're Wilbur and Orville Wright's father.
Oh, really?
You'd have to watch that again, but I just thought, well, how great that is that? That's a cool
I didn't
story.
even know that.
Well, they had you like learning to fly or something.
Yeah, the actor who played Grizzly Adams was actually, worked with him before I did a Tarzan, and he was the animal trainer in South America. So I remembered him doing that.
Yeah, no, he was the good animal handler and so many things before.
That's right.
Yeah. So what was Ron Ely like in that Tarzan?
He was great. He was a good Tarzan, I thought, and got along great with him. And it was a lot of fun shooting in South America. I remember at one point I saw a snake. It's huge. It must have been a boa constrictor that just kept going and going on that was very exciting.
One of the best musicals of all time is Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and I've got a bride and a brother. They weren't together in that film, but they're together right here. We have Miss Ruta Lee and Russ Tamblyn.
And it was a Western.
Yes.
That's the good part, a musical Western.
I love it. I know you love Westerns, and you do too, because there's something about the people that work on them, not just the people that are in them, but there's something about a camaraderie and a family.
Well, you work very hard when you're doing a musical and when you're doing a Western, and something has to make it a little easier, and that is the love and the humor that is shared by the people in the show.
Yeah, I was telling him about that I introduced Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and I said, can you imagine somebody coming to the studio or MGM and saying, I got a great idea for a musical, and it's a great idea. It's based on the rape of the Sabine women. Isn't that a good idea? Oh, yeah. And the studio said, oh, yeah, that's terrific. So Seven Brothers, who are you going to get for the brothers? Well, ballet dancers.
Raping and singing.
Well, that was Michael Kidd, of course, was our choreographer. And
great choreographer.
He has not just magic feet, but a magic brain that can see, and how he conceived that barn-raising dance is incredible. And boy, did we work on that.
Well, you were a dancer beforehand. Now, Russ was a tumbler.
A tumbler, an acrobat, and everything.
What kind of background did you have to put you in that position? Because you weren't even called Ruta Lee.
No, I was my real name, which is Ruta Kilmonas. And MGM came to me a lot later when they discovered they had a real hit on their hands, because the big money all went to Brigadoon. which was beautiful, but it didn't have the heart,
No.
the soul, the spirit, the gut.
Or the songs.
You're right. Well, I had really no really good formal training. I thought I was a dancer and I took class, but that's about it. And when I found myself, as I'm sure you felt the same way, Russ, found myself in the morning class, the bar that we all did, not the one you drink at, but the one you stretch your legs at.
I was at the other one.
I figured you were. I would find myself saying, what in hell am I doing with some of the best dancers in America? How did I get here? Well, I always said that my mother went across the street and prayed at the church across the street from casting, and I went in and did my Lithuanian polka, and I'm not sure which got me the job.
Yeah.
Maybe both.
Well, they made you dye your hair red. Everybody had red hair.
Yeah.
Was that an experience as you have gotten over by now?
Not yet.
I tell a story about Russ all the time. And in those days, we didn't have jeans. The guys wore khakis. And he had on a sweatshirt, but it was a sweatshirt that had been washed so many times that it was no longer navy blue. It was now sort of a lavender. And he had this on, and he stopped in to pick up a pack of cigarettes in a little cafe on Hollywood Boulevard somewhere. And as he walked in, he noticed the ladies sitting at the counter going, and he thought to himself, oh, they're beginning to notice me. I'm beginning to become an entity, a star. And I guess they noticed me. And he paid for the cigarettes. And as he walked out, he looked at the girls and he smiled and kind of tipped his hat, which he didn't have on, but he had this flaming red hair, Lucille Ball orange in color. And as he went by, he heard one lady say to the other, "See, Mary, I told you she was a lesbian."
True story.
Oh, when he came into the studio that morning, slamming his feet down and slamming the door, saying, damn it, what's the matter? What's the matter? And he told the story.
Just so cute.
And I love it so. I love it.
You were paired with who in that film as your bride?
Her name was Nancy Kilgus.
And she was a professional dancer.
She was. She was.
Yeah, I think.
And she was adorable, but I don't know, she didn't ever do anything after that I'm aware of.
Well, it's not an easy business, as you guys know. I mean, and I look at both of your credits, your long list of credits, and it's exceptional. And, talent rises sometimes, but a lot of luck, too.
Luck is, I think, 70% of it.
Maybe 80.
Yeah, if you have talent, it's great to back up whatever comes your way.
Tell me about the premiere of the film, because you guys must have both been at the premiere of Seven Brides.
I didn't go to it.
Sure you did. Didn't we all, or was it just the brides? We were all taken, and this was like a big deal, to Houston. And we were staying at the big fancy hotel. I can't remember what it was called then. And that was quite a deal. And of course, Miss Julie, who is 6 feet tall to start with, Julie Newmar, who was one of the brides, had the most bizarre outfits all the time. I'm sure you remember some of these things, because I remember the makeup department used to say, well, Julie just flew in on her broom, let's get her in the chair, because she always had something wild on, and she would come in with white stuff on her face and her hair doing, but whatever it is that she did, she's still beautiful. And one could learn to hate that girl.
Wasn't she Stupefying Jones in the Little Abner movie?
Yeah, she was.
Wow.
And she did very well in film.
Mm-hmm.
She marched to her own drummer, wouldn't you say, Russ?
Yeah, I would think so.
And
she was just eccentric.
Yeah.
Really eccentric.
And her mother had been a showgirl, which is no surprise that Julie came out tall and gorgeous the way she did. But she used to, as we were just talking about, she used to, in the middle of a take, I mean, it could be, and by the way, we shot Seven Brides in 2 processes, widescreen and CinemaScope.
The cameras weren't next to each other rolling at the same time?
No. But in the middle of one of these many takes, not stopping to think of how much it costs every time, cut and don't print, she would reach into her ample bosom and pull out a piece of, I don't think we had tinfoil in those days, but wax paper, and unwrap it and eat her cheese. And it was always a stinky cheese.
That is eccentric, though.
Just a wee bit. She was lovely and wonderful and very sweet.
When was the last time you two worked together?
On that film.
Mm-hmm. Never worked together since. We've done retrospectives of the film with wonderful people. In fact, some of them, even Howard was still alive, and Howard Keel, of course, I'm talking about.
And Janie?
Janie, exactly. I mean, we'd get together, and it was always wonderful at one of the big theaters somewhere. And it was so exciting, if you will remember this, Russ, to sit and watch your movie and have the audience applaud each number, just like in the theater. You know, you always felt like you needed to take a bow then and there. It was just great.
Was that based on a play, or was it all original for the film?
It was original for the film, I think. But then they turned it into a show afterwards.
Was that successful?
I don't know.
I think fairly so. It played New York for a bit, and I know it played around the country. I never saw it. I sort of had a terrible feeling about not wanting to see somebody doing my part.
You did on stage Bye Bye Birdie, the musical, and you had the Dick Van Dyke part.
Yes, and I played opposite Cheetah. And the one thing with Cheetah you couldn't mention is Rita Marin.
But Rita was fabulous in that movie.
Rita's fabulous in everything.
But that was a great part, too, in West Side.
You visited the set of the remake that Spielberg did, too, didn't you?
Yeah.
But they were excited.
One day we were in New York, and Steven sent a car for us, and we went to the set, and he took some pictures, and all the dancers weren't working that day, but they all came in. He talked and answered a lot of questions. And
what did you think of his interpretation?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I would say that there were parts of it that I thought were better than our film, but there were parts in our film that were better, I thought. But I loved Steven. He was just the sweetest, nicest man. And he introduced me from the stage. He came out on the stage to introduce the film, and he said, "We have somebody here for, one of the stars from the original." So I stood up and took a bow and...
Oh, good.
Yeah. You think I love movies? He loves movies. Like Tarantino. And you worked with Q as the son of the gunfighter.
Yeah, I think I had one line.
That one line in the Tarantino movie puts you right there in the forefront of today's cinema. He's great to work with, though, isn't he?
Oh, he's terrific, and he had a tremendous memory of films.
Well, anyway, this has been great. It's a thrill for me to have you both together.
It's a thrill to be together. I think that's wonderful. Thank you.
And my old buddy.
Got it. We used to have coffees and Cokes and things together. We palled around. It was so sweet.
And as soon as I shut this camera off, boys, they're going to get up and dance, and you at home won't be able to see it. So I'm sorry, but thanks for joining us anyway.
It was really cool to have Russ on the show because I was quite excited to tell him I'd gotten on the further side in the callback process to play his role in Spielberg's version of West Side Story a couple years back. My dad was filming my self-tapes for that.
Well, I know the cutoff had to do with your inability to dance.
Yeah, and while I wouldn't go as far as saying complete inability, I certainly am no Russ Tamblyn.
Nobody is, and I think that's one of the joys about having him share his stories too. It was terrific, and his wife Bonnie was our audience for this conversation too, and then to have Russ and Ruta together, what a thrill, what a big thrill. And that movie, like they said, was a surprise hit. Everybody thought it was going to be, well, all the executives at MGM anyway thought that Brigadoon was going to be the big hit, so that's where the money went. Mm-hmm. And then the timeless classic turns out to be Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Dancing on the Edge is such a fabulous book, too, and I did it on Audible, where Russ did the reading, and it takes you right there. That's the magic of Audible, and that's, I think, the magic of these podcasts is that we're bringing these stars into people's homes or their headphones.
Yeah, and right into their ears, to
Yes.
their ear canals, which is where I am right now.
Well, thanks for joining us, RJ.
It was my pleasure, Rob. Happy trails. If you enjoy what we do here, please take a moment to follow our show and share these interviews with your friends. You can also find A Word on Westerns on Patreon, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you, and see you next week on A Word on Westerns. Westerns is produced and hosted by Rob and RJ Word, and produced by Caroline Parker Stark. Edited by Alex Lockett and Bohr and Ebor Dro. Location audio is provided by Richard Reagan. Sound design by Alex Lockett. A Word on Westerns theme song was composed by Karel Pasoda, with additional arrangements by Shipwreck Music and RJ Word.